Steve, we have high hopes from you. Are you there?
Yes, I am, yes.
Hallelujah. It's lovely to have you on the telephone this morning. Good afternoon. And we really do have high hopes of what you're going to be bringing to us, because it's very, very interesting. You are one of Carolyn's clients, and you are, your business is entitled AE. So perhaps I should just let you explain what AE is.
Well, AE stands for Accelerated Education. So that's what we believe in doing. We want to accelerate children's learning, and we particularly deal with primary school children. We take them at 7 years old, and by the time they're 11, I mean, really the business, I suppose, is kids to super kids. So we're trying to accelerate those children's learning.
So how long have you been involved doing AE?
Well, I started the tuition business. First of all, I was a teacher in state school for about 9 years.
So maybe we need to go back a little bit. Tell us your background then. How did you get involved in education?
Well, I trained as a teacher about 30 years ago. First of all, I was teaching in schools, in secondary schools and primary schools. I became a head of department in schools, and after about 9 years of full-time teaching, I went part-time. And as part of that, I was doing some private tuition with individual children, and I started to notice that some of those children didn't appear to be really good on their basic skills and basic learning. So I was very much focused on that.
So you decided that you were going to do something quite different. Starting up on your own must have been quite scary.
Well, to begin with, I suppose I ended up teaching around about 30 clients a week, 30 children a week, who had varying levels of difficulty with their reading, with their maths, and I seemed to be quite good at working out how to solve those problems. So I suppose as the business started to develop and I started to get other people involved, we were very much focused on ensuring that children had mastered basic skills. Now, for whatever reason, they weren't always in school seemingly able to master those skills. I mean, I'm not attaching any blame to that, but that appeared to be the problem. And many children going up into the secondary system that I had encountered as well in state school appeared to lack basic maths and English literacy skills. And that, to me, needed to be seriously addressed.
So accelerated education, I mean, how did that all come about in the first place then, Steve? You know, whose vision, dream was it?
I suppose as soon as I started teaching children in groups, I asked myself the question, what am I really doing? And I thought, well, what I'm doing is accelerating children's learning. So that became the title of the business, really. And it stuck with us, really, I suppose. And I was also began to prepare a lot of children, because the natural corollary, really, of preparing children and getting them to a very high level is that many of those children were going on to sit for grammar school exams and for very good private school exams and scholarships. So we became quite focused on helping those children not only master their basic skills in maths and English, but many of them were going on to be successful in grammar school exams. So that was quite a spur to us, and we thought, we're really onto something here. And that's how books began to develop, which were, appropriate for children in primary schools, but also appropriate for helping children pass their 11+ examination.
So this is additional teaching for children that are in schools. You're not sort of taking children out of schools, and this is something different.
Yes. As a tuition business, we operate out of Slough, and we teach children in the evenings. Most children come to us for a couple of hours a week, and at weekends. So they have their class and they come every week. So we're now quite a sizable operation working in Slough. We teach around about 1,400 children a week. So We're quite a large operation. But our books, of course, are available nationally.
Steve, I'm just going to stop you there for a second. We're going to have another piece of music.
Okay.
And then we'll come back and you can talk to us in more detail about your book. So don't go anywhere.
I'm very happy to do that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. If you have just joined, you are very, very welcome. And this afternoon I'm speaking with Carolyn Freeman from Revelation Marketing. And also on the telephone I have Steve, who is live over there in Slough. Good afternoon again, Steve.
Good afternoon.
We've just been chatting about your business, which is Accelerated Education, and you were a teacher. You came out of normal teaching, started to provide this additional teaching in the evening for children to accelerate their learning. And although the material was good and up to standard, you just felt that there was perhaps something different that you could add. So tell us about how you went about producing other books.
Well, what first began as a search for materials, because I was teaching children individually, and I in the end turned into the writing of books. I think I used to, it was quite strange actually, I used to know the manager at W.H. Smith in Slough, and I constantly used to complain about the lack of materials.
Other bookstores are available?
Yes, I mean just books that I couldn't seem to find things that were appropriate for the children that I was teaching, and particularly in the area of maths to begin with. And I constantly sort of carped about this, and eventually Cathy said to me, why don't you write your own then? And I looked at her and I said, all right, I will then. So that was how it began. I first of all came up with some books, and we were selling through the local retailers at W.H. Smith, and then it took off with a deal with them, and we were then selling across the country. So it all happened very, very quickly. So and the books themselves were structured in a very, by method really, teaching children, starting with 4 rules of number, then 4 rules of decimals, 4 rules of fractions, then percentages. I tended to teach by subject.
I take it maths is your core subject.
Well,
yes,
to begin
yes.
with.
Yes.
Obviously, we provide English.
Get excited by numbers.
Sorry?
I said someone who gets excited by numbers.
Well, I'm not. I wasn't trained really. I'm an English teacher by background, and I wasn't really trained as a maths teacher. But I suppose, I had some mathematical understanding, and I put my mind to it really, and in the end, that's where we got to. But I wanted to produce books that were very systematic and dealt very much with a building block approach. In other words, everything you understand is built upon what comes before it. So, I liken mathematics to the building of a house. That you've got to put the foundations in, then you build the walls, then you put the roof on, and then you put the windows in, then you put the soft furnishings in and all the other things that you need. But you can't actually put it together out of order. And if you try to approach it another way, so let's put the roof up first, doesn't really work. Or put the windows up first, you can't do that. So I very much had a sort of building block approach to maths, and I think it works. And the children seem to really respond to that. And it's a more traditional way of teaching maths, and I'm not ashamed of that, vis-a-vis a more progressive way. Although I very much believe that once children have mastered basic algorithms and methodologies, they're very much able to be the kind of creative, take on the creative and problem-solving skills that they need. They're able to develop those, and we can encourage that development as well.
I think, Sheena, one other thing that I really love about working with AE is that it's so easy, really, to market good quality products. And this is what I really love about it, is that the books are high quality. There's nothing else that we've found on the market, and we've spoken to a number of their clients who said they've looked everywhere and they can't find anything of this high quality. And over and above that, every single book that they publish has already spent a year in their tuition centre being tested, being finalised, making sure that everything is that the children are able to do, and that each book has proven success. They don't just write books and shove it onto the market and hope that it sells and try and flog it. It's really based in proper success stories and things that actually really work. And it's
yes, I agree. I mean, we are very conscious about quality control, really, I suppose, that we have to test a product and really tweak it and also get all the mistakes out of it, which, quite frankly, is quite difficult to do. And the children are very good at finding mistakes. So we hopefully put a book out onto the market, and I think we can almost say hand on heart that they're almost perfect when we put them out. You may find the odd thing, but we're always constantly in a correction mode.
I mean, it's sounding a bit to me like, it's bespoke education. So, for example, a parent identifies that her child has already got a skill in a particular area and then points that out to you. You're able to say, well, this is the kind of book that we can use to help them.
Yes, I mean, certainly our maths books and English books, everything we produce is designed to take children from where they are to where we think they need to be, and I think every parent's aspiration is to see their child when they leave primary school and go into the secondary system, really able to cope, because secondary schools are not really designed, to be honest, to pick up, lots of problems in reading and basic numeracy or literacy skills, because children are moving from classroom to classroom. And, if they're followed around by a whole army of special needs teachers, it doesn't really work as well. If you're going to sort the problems out, you really want to do it in the primary sector. And when children come up into the secondary sector, they should be secure in their basic skills so that the teachers can then really move on with them and not deal with basic problems, which I think is being experienced in the system nationally to a large extent. And we constantly hear, these figures that Britain is now sort of 27th or 24th out of 27 nations in literacy and numeracy. And, you think, well, why is that? We should be right up the top there. And I think we can be. So, we're hoping to do our little bit in perhaps promoting that.
Well, you're sounding like your little bit's quite a big bit, and you just sound like, to me, you sound like a breath of fresh air, and I'm sure people listening in will also be thinking that. We're going to go to a piece of music, but let's just let people know your website, Steve, www.aepublications.co.uk, and that's where people can go and find out a lot about what you're up to, yes?
Yes, that's correct. They can also go to our tuition website as well, which is the same, www.aetuition.co.uk, but the same, obviously we'll get them to the websites that we have in operation, yes.
We're going to have another short break and some music, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to ask you a few other questions. For example, why should parents buy your books rather than anyone else's? And for you to give us some success stories. So we'll be back with Steve just in a second. Well, we have Steve on the line, and he's helping generations of local children make the right decision and their parents to, have accelerated education as part of their education, not exclusively, but as part of, Steve. Now, you're a Christian and you go to a local church over there in Slough, and there's a...
in Twickenham, actually.
In Twickenham, sorry.
I work in Slough.
Where Scotland win the rugby all the time, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, I'll just get that little plug in. But the church, there's a local school near to where you are, so maybe you could just tell us about that.
We have a primary school attached to the church, St Stephen's in Twickenham. Yes, so it's a very successful primary school in the Richmond borough, and and we have a very, very lively church as well. Yes, it's very good.
So Sunday's a day off for you?
Well, we do have to work because tuition does go on Sunday.
Oh, really? Right, okay.
Yes, I end up going to church on Sunday evenings. That's the way it works for me. So, but it's fine. It works. I understand the issues of tuition, because when the children are available, we do have to teach them. Unfortunately, that's the only option we have. So, yes. Anyway.
So just a few other questions. I'm just finding it all very interesting, and I'm sure people listening in are finding it interesting as well. So, if I'm a parent and I have a child, but I don't really know where to start, where would they start with the series of books?
Well, we, as a tuition business, we start with our children around about 7 or 8 years old. And I think it's infant children, years 1 and 2, are really kind of finding their feet, and there's a lot of play involved and just developing basic literacy and numeracy skills. And I think that's fine, but as soon as children get into the primary system, year 3, year 4, it's at that point, you know, you've got to be really sure that your child is making the progress. And I think often it's in years 3 to 6 that things can go awry. And if it's not picked up quick enough, then, you know, there are problems later, really, which may not really have surfaced that badly in the primary system. But if you go into secondary school carrying those problems, you really are in difficulty. So I would say parents should start working with their children or keeping an eye on what's going on from around about year 3, checking that their reading is up to speed and their numeracy skills are developing, that their times table skills are developing. I mean, we for instance, make sure all of our children have learned all of their times tables by the end of year 3. So, you know, we're really, you know, intent on children having memorised them not by rote, but by, you know, in random. So if someone asks 7/8, they'll know it's 56. They won't have to sit and think about that. They'll be able to give you the answer.
And one thing, Sheena, that I've noticed as well is that we've often had parents phone in to the tuition centre admin and say, well, we've got my child is at this level in maths or this level in English, so what book should I start with in the AE publication series of maths? And we've always said to them, start at book 1, because you don't really know, or parents sometimes don't have a good perception of how advanced or how not advanced their child is. And if they're really good, they'll fly through the first couple of books and possibly pick up some things along the way. And then when they start slowing down a little bit, that's when the parent knows that they're at that level. And we've also found that we always encourage parents to work through the books with their children, not to just give the book to the child and go, just sit them in a corner and say, go for it.
Yes, we're very much would encourage the parent to work alongside their child and to mark the work and be engaged in that process. I mean, even as a tuition business, we involve parents a great deal. We obviously deliver a tuition program using our books, but parents can very much use our books because the explanations are very clear, because they are how-to books and not just test books, to assist their children. And when a child doesn't understand something, they can often pick it up themselves, because we do know that around about 40% of the population don't have maths of a high level, and that's, it's a bit embarrassing for parents to have to admit that to their children, but often they want their child to do better than they did.
Yeah. And another thing, Sheena, is that the AE don't just do maths and English, they also do verbal reasoning and non-verbal reasoning.
We do.
And it's really unique to AE that they have a non-verbal series of books that both the child can go through, and the parents also say, we've learned so much from this and we've really benefited from going through these books with the children.
Our basic philosophy has always been, and I think it's something which we continue to espouse, is that our books are about teaching children how to do things. They're not just practice in confirming a child's ability in being able to do something they've already learned. It's about how do you do it and then practicing that skill. And primary school children very much respond to this how-to approach. They're very inquisitive, and they want it in black and white. They want to know, how does this happen? How does this work? They're not interested in philosophy or deep thinking at that point. They want the process, and that's what we do. Later comes all of that, with abstract thinking and learning, which we very much want them to achieve and to be able to develop, but they won't have that at the beginning. They very much want the technique.
Steve, I think... Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just thinking back. My children are well past primary school, but I think where I went wrong with the verbal reasoning books was I used to use them to hit them on the head when they didn't do it properly.
Okay. Well, yes. Yeah,
Maybe that's why they've got sore heads now and they're bright as well. But no, seriously, I do remember those verbal reasoning books. Steve, we're just going to stop for another short break, another piece of music. It's John Waller with Identity, and then we'll come back and we'll just chat to you a bit more. So we'll be back with you just in a minute. If you have just joined, you are unfortunately just in time for us to say goodbye to Steve. If you've been with us for the last hour, I know you will have been very intrigued with what he's been talking about. AE Accelerated Education. You can find out more about that on www.aepublications.co.uk. But Steve, you've spoken a lot about your business, you've spoken a lot about what you do, but can you tell us some success stories?
Yeah, I can think of a number of children, but obviously from early on when I first started, there were children who particularly stood out. I do remember a boy called Mostin, who when I tested him, he was desperate to have a go at the 11 plus exam, and I tested him and I found he had a reading age of around about 7, and he knew none of his tables, and he was completely, as I could see, it was a hopeless case. But the boy himself was so determined that in the end I agreed to teach him. And I don't think I've ever come across a kid who works so hard. And every single week he'd say to me, "Where am I now? Where am I now?" And I think I had him for about 3 to 4 months. And, he was the only boy in his class that passed the exam. So, that was really, it taught me an awful lot about the fact that, a child's determination to do something is key. But also a lot of the methodologies that I was using with Mostin at that time are the things that we're doing now. And children, succeed because I was teaching them a particular way, in a very step-by-step way. And he was just grasping things he hadn't grasped for 4 years at school, and no one believed. In the end, he had to take the letter into school because they laughed at him when he said he'd passed the exam.
Well done, well done.
And also, Sheena, we've been doing quite a bit of work with the AE guys and rebuilding their websites and rebranding them. And in the process of doing that, we videoed a number of the parents and children at AE Tuition at the centre in Slough. And the testimonials were amazing. And we even had a little boy, Luke, who was saying how he's so much better than all the other kids in his class, and he loves being better than them, and he loves being top of the class when he wasn't before. And the parents can't talk enough about how well their children are doing. And if any of the listeners want to have a look at some of those testimonials, we've put them up on the AE Publications website. And Steve does talk about his books, but
spread the message really, because in Slough we're completely full. We are turning parents away from us, but we believe that what drives the success of what we're doing is our publications, it's our books, because it's what's in those books that we're delivering, and we believe that that's a wider message, and that process can be, can happen elsewhere, and parents can use our books, and other tutors can use our books.
And then even in the school, Sheena, they've got 80 to 86% success rate of children passing the 11 plus exams. So
yeah, and going to top private schools, we win many, many scholarships. And last year, we achieved 40 scholarships, and we've got some coming through this year as well now. So we're hearing about those. And these are scholarships. Some of those scholarships were full fees paid. Children just, have never been in the private system, never been in the prep system, having a go at the scholarship in the private sector and winning it over and above children that have been prepared for years for it.
So, Steve, Mrs. Smith's listening in this afternoon, and Johnny, would love to have your books, but she doesn't live in Slough. So how will she cope with just having the books without having you looking over her shoulder?
Well, I think she'll cope very well. That's a good starting point anyway. Obviously, a good tutor always helps if you don't feel confident enough with using the books. But I think if you buy books first and have a look, and then you often find parents that are able to really assist their children from our books because they're so practical and they show you how to do it. They don't just throw things at you. their potential.
So just in closing, Steve, why should parents buy your books rather than other people's?
I think because we very much are focused on getting children to learn their basic skills in a step-by-step traditional approach. Now, I'm not against progressive education at all. What I believe, though, is that in primary schools, we must focus on teaching children basic skills in a step-by-step traditional methodology. Later on, once we've really established them in that, we can move off into all sorts of experimental stuff and all sorts of, problem solving and other things. But we can't start with that. That's not the starting point. The starting point is to make sure children have got basic algorithms in maths and that they really have good numeracy, good literacy, their reading skills are up to standard. All of those things are there in place. And our spelling and vocabulary books, and English books, and all the other things that we're producing help really establish children in those key skill areas, which is what your child needs to establish themselves in the educational system.
Steve, thanks very, very much for joining us this afternoon. It's been really informative and it's been
Okay.
really, really good.
I'm very pleased to have been able to help.
To hear about what you're doing. So till the next time, goodbye and
Yes.
God bless. Bye-bye.
I look forward to being on your programme again.
Thank
At some
you.
point.
Bye-bye.
Thank you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well,